New York City, 4:03 a.m., Upper East Side. A penthouse that looked more like a showroom than a home. The man standing barefoot in the middle of it could bankrupt nations with a phone call. But at that hour, the only thing he couldn't control was the storm inside his chest. Beckett Hale stared at his reflection in the blackened glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. The skyline blinked in the distance. Everything was quiet, too quiet for someone whose mind never stopped. He pressed a glass of untouched bourbon to his lips, then lowered it again without drinking. Behind him, the television hummed in silence. He'd muted the news hours ago, unable to listen to another segment about rising markets or his next acquisition. None of it mattered. Not anymore. For the past 3 years, Beckett had existed in a body that refused to respond. The man who was once hailed as the Lion of Wall Street, the cold genius who'd reshaped global finance, was now reduced to a hollow echo of himself, carrying a secret he'd never spoken out loud. His phone buzzed across the marble countertop. He didn't flinch. He already knew who it was, the medical director from the European clinic he'd secretly flown to last month. They had run every test money could buy. Scans, blood work, specialists from 6 countries. The answer, like always, was nothing. "Mr. Hale, there's no physical reason we can find." He'd ended the call before the sentence was finished. Beckett dropped into one of the minimalist chairs, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and stared at the ground like it might offer answers. 3 years. 3 years without feeling. Not emotionally. Physically. His body had betrayed him. He hated the word for it. The clinical label. The way it was whispered about like a curse in private medical circles. He could still lift weights, still run 6 miles every morning. His body was in peak condition by every measurable standard. But that one part of him, the one connected to his manhood, his intimacy, his desire, had gone completely silent. No trauma to the spine, no disease, no accident, just a switch in his soul that flipped off and never turned back on. Until her. His eyes blinked hard at the thought. He hadn't planned to remember her tonight. He had tried to fight it, but her name slipped through his thoughts like warmth in a room that had been cold too long. Amina. The maid who walked into his life without knowing who he was. The one who touched nothing but somehow reached everything. Beckett Hale could command empires. But she, unknowingly, had commanded something greater. The return of his own body, and that scared him more than losing everything he owned. It had started long before her, though. Before the lodge. Before the snow. Before the fireplace and her laugh and that slight accidental brush of her hand. It started the night he walked into his penthouse expecting to be celebrated, and left feeling destroyed. That was the night his body shut down. And that's where everything truly began. If you've ever felt unseen, unloved, or broken, drop A in the comments. And if this story touches you, don't forget to subscribe. It helps more than you know. No one knew the truth about Beckett Hale. Not the press, not his employees, not even his closest board members. They thought he was eccentric. They thought he was just intensely private. Some thought he had no interest in women at all. Others said he'd given up on relationships because he didn't need anyone. But if someone looked close enough, past the tabloid rumors, past the limited appearances, past the rehearsed smiles, they would have seen the truth hiding in plain sight. Beckett was a man at war with his own body. He had flown to Zurich, to Tel Aviv, to Seoul. He had laid in white hospital beds with the most expensive specialists at his bedside. He had sat through clinical exams that measured everything except the part he actually needed someone to understand. They checked his spine, his blood flow, his hormone levels, even his brain. Every chart came back clean. Nothing explained the absence of connection between his mind and body. But Beckett didn't need a diagnosis to know what had happened. His body had shut down the night Veronica betrayed him. It wasn't a medical failure. It was emotional surrender. The mind remembers pain longer than any nerve in the body ever could. And in that memory, it sometimes shuts off the power. You don't need to be a billionaire to know that kind of wound. Sometimes it starts with a breakup that leaves you doubting your worth. Sometimes it's a sentence someone said that sticks in your chest like glass. Sometimes it's betrayal so deep your body forgets how to feel safe again. It doesn't matter where you're from, Southside Chicago or Manhattan penthouse. Pain has no zip code. Beckett stopped dating. Not because he was cold, but because he was ashamed. He stopped touching women, not because he didn't want intimacy, but because he didn't want to feel like half a man. He started avoiding eye contact in meetings. He'd sit in silence while doctors tried to spin his condition with Phrases like psychological barrier and disassociated response. What they didn't say, but what he felt deep down, was that his body no longer trusted him with closeness. That kind of pain doesn't just sting, it corrodes. And the more he avoided it, the more it cemented itself in place. He wondered if anyone else in the world knew this kind of quiet humiliation, waking up and dreading your own reflection, living in a perfect body that felt disconnected from your soul, not knowing if it would ever come back. He had given up on himself. Until that morning, in the lodge, when a maid with warm eyes and no agenda walked into his suite. And something sparked. He had felt nothing for 1,095 days, but the moment her arm brushed his, just barely, a part of him flickered back on. He didn't know her name, but his entire world shifted because of her presence. No one knew the truth about Beckett Hale. Not the press, not his employees, not even his closest board members. They thought he was eccentric. They thought he was just intensely private. Some thought he had no interest in women at all. Others said he'd given up on relationships because he didn't need anyone. But if someone looked close enough, past the tabloid rumors, past the limited appearances, past the rehearsed smiles, they would have seen the truth hiding in plain sight. Beckett was a man at war with his own body. He had flown to Zurich, to Tel Aviv, to Seoul. He had laid in white hospital beds with the most expensive specialists at his bedside. He had sat through clinical exams that measured everything except the part he actually needed someone to understand. They checked his spine, his blood flow, his hormone levels, even his brain. Every chart came back clean. Nothing explained the absence of connection between his mind and body. But Beckett didn't need a diagnosis to know what had happened. His body had shut down the night Veronica betrayed him. It wasn't a medical failure. It was emotional surrender. The mind remembers pain longer than any nerve in the body ever could. And in that memory, it sometimes shuts off the power. You don't need to be a billionaire to know that kind of wound. Sometimes it starts with a breakup that leaves you doubting your worth. Sometimes it's a sentence someone said that sticks in your chest like glass. Sometimes it's betrayal so deep your body forgets how to feel safe again. It doesn't matter where you're from, South Side Chicago or Manhattan penthouse. Pain has no zip code. Beckett stopped dating, not because he was cold, but because he was ashamed. He stopped touching women, not because he didn't want intimacy, but because he didn't want to feel like half a man. He started avoiding eye contact in meetings. He'd sit in silence while doctors tried to spin his condition with phrases like psychological barrier and disassociated response. What they didn't say, but what he felt deep down, was that his body no longer trusted him with closeness. That kind of pain doesn't just sting, it corrodes. And the more he avoided it, the more it cemented itself in place. He wondered if anyone else in the world knew this kind of quiet humiliation, waking up and dreading your own reflection, living in a perfect body that felt disconnected from your soul, not knowing if it would ever come back. He had given up on himself. Until that morning, in the lodge, when a maid with warm eyes and no agenda walked into his suite, and something sparked. He had felt nothing for 1,095 days, but the moment her arm brushed his, just barely, a part of him flickered back on. He didn't know her name, but his entire world shifted because of her presence. 3 years earlier, Manhattan. The night had started with champagne and celebration. His company had just closed a multi-billion-dollar merger, and Beckett Hale was the man of the hour. Board members toasted him. The press praised him. Champagne flowed. Waitstaff hovered with trays. Everything sparkled, except him. He hated these kinds of events. But Veronica insisted. "You need to be seen, Beckett," she had whispered into his ear before they left the car. "People want to celebrate you." She didn't mean that in a loving way. She meant it like a campaign manager prepping a candidate. Still, he smiled, posed for photos, made the rounds. Veronica stood on his arm like a custom accessory. Her dress cost more than the annual salary of one of his assistants. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. At 10:17 p.m., he told her he had a migraine and slipped away from the gala. He didn't. He just needed quiet. He needed to be somewhere without everyone pulling on his energy like it belonged to them. His penthouse wasn't far, just a quick drive. He took the elevator up, loosened his tie, tossed his cufflinks in the dish by the door. And then he heard it. Laughter. A low, intimate kind that didn't belong in his home. He followed the sound like a man floating underwater, each step slower than the last. The bedroom door was cracked. The light was on. He pushed it open. What he saw made something inside him go silent. Veronica, in lingerie he'd bought her, legs draped over another man's lap. A man Beckett had mentored, invested in, spoken well of publicly. Veronica didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked at him with the calm of someone who had already decided her side. "You were always easier to admire than to love," she said flatly. The room tilted. He didn't yell. He didn't slam anything. He turned and left without a word. He never asked for an explanation. He never slept in that bedroom again. The next morning, his body stopped responding. No arousal, no desire, no spark. He dismissed it at first. Stress, he thought. A few days passed. Still nothing. He called his doctor, then another, then 5 more. Every test said the same thing. "You're fine, Mr. Hale." But he wasn't. Because deep inside him, the boy who once overheard his parents say he's just not lovable had returned. And this time, the boy was carrying all of Beckett's manhood in his fists and refusing to let it go. 3 years passed. He dated a few times, casual, superficial. Nothing deep, nothing real. But the second things got intimate, his body went still. No function, no reaction. The most powerful man in the room was powerless in bed. He'd stopped trying after the second year. Started wearing the mask of intense focus on work. But every night, alone in a penthouse filled with silence, he faced the same truth. He could fix markets. He could build empires. He could hire anyone, buy anything, control everything. Except the one part of himself that mattered most. Beckett Hale was tired of New York. Tired of the noise, the cameras, the doctors, the lies he told himself. So he did something he rarely did. He disappeared. No press, no assistant, just a burner phone and a reservation made under someone else's name. A private mountain lodge in Colorado, hand-built suites, wood-burning fireplaces, no media access, no expectations. It wasn't healing he was chasing. It was silence. He arrived under gray skies, wearing his usual armor, tailored coat, gloves, sunglasses, don't talk to me energy. The lodge staff respected his distance. They called him Mr. Ford. No questions. His suite, number 12, had its own wing, overlooking the mountains. For the first 4 days he barely left it. He worked remotely, took calls, reviewed numbers. He followed his routine like religion. Wake, run, shower, email, eat alone, think too much. It wasn't working. Nothing ever did. Until the morning she knocked. The door clicked. He thought it was maintenance. He was standing at the window, staring out at a range of snow-dusted pines, when he heard the shuffle of someone entering. Then a voice. "Excuse me, sir. I'm just here to clean. I'll be quick." He turned. She was young, mid-20s. Black, braids tied back, no makeup, just a simple gray uniform and a pair of old sneakers. She looked up, and their eyes met. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't recognition. It was quiet. A calmness passed through his chest, the kind he hadn't felt in years. She blinked. "Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. I can come back." "No," he said, too quickly. "It's fine. Stay." She nodded and went to work, folding towels, tidying up, lighting a new log in the fireplace. She moved with intention, but not urgency. Grace without effort. He found himself watching her, and when she walked past him to adjust the windows, their arms brushed. It was accidental, a light graze, but something flickered. A jolt shot through him, warm, electric, undeniable. He froze. She didn't notice. She was already fluffing pillows, humming something soft. But Beckett Hale, the man who had gone 3 years without feeling anything at all, felt his body respond. Not a full return. Not yet, but enough. Enough to scare him. Enough to make him sit down, press a hand to his chest, and whisper, "What was that?" She finished cleaning, gave a polite smile, and left. She didn't know what she'd done. She didn't know who he was, but Beckett couldn't stop thinking about her. That was the moment it started. Not a miracle. Not lust. A spark. From a stranger. With a mop. And a heart big enough to shift the one thing inside him no one else had touched. Not even him. The night it happened, Beckett had returned early from a company gala. Not because of a headache. Not because he was tired. but because something in his gut told him to leave. The driver dropped him off without questions. He took the elevator alone, his mind on autopilot. He'd left his coat and tie in the car. The penthouse was dark, but he knew someone was home. Veronica had sent a text an hour earlier, "See you soon, darling." He heard the music first, then her laugh, high, breathy, too familiar. He followed it to the bedroom, stopped at the doorway, his breath caught before sound ever did. She was there, with Landon Reese, a man Beckett had mentored, invested in, brought onto his board. The betrayal wasn't just in what he saw. It was in the way they looked at him, like he was an interruption to their evening. Veronica's eyes barely blinked. Landon looked mildly uncomfortable. This wasn't planned, Beckett. Veronica sat up, brushing her hair behind her ear. Calm, polished, cruel. "You were never really here, Beckett," she said flatly. "You're so busy performing for the world, you forgot how to be touched." He said nothing. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just turned and walked out. But something inside him stayed behind and never followed him back. That night, he went to a hotel. In the morning, he couldn't feel a thing. Not just emotionally, physically. His body no longer recognized desire, no longer reacted, no longer responded. 3 years passed, and not once did anything change. Until Amina. Suite 12, day 4. Amina Carter was humming while she dusted the windowsill. Beckett sat on the edge of the bed, pretending to read an email. He wasn't working. He was watching. Something about the rhythm of her movements, the way she paused to adjust a blanket or realign a frame, made the suite feel lived in for the first time. She bent slightly to pick up a dropped towel. Her braid slipped over her shoulder. The scent of lavender drifted past him, and when she stood and brushed against him again, the same light, unintentional contact from 2 days before, he gasped softly. Heat, pressure, a flicker of feeling. It rushed from the center of him outward, down his spine, through his stomach, lower. He stood quickly. Too quickly. Amina turned. "You all right, Mr. Ford?" He nodded stiffly. "Yes, just dizzy." She stepped forward, concerned. "You want me to get someone?" "No," he said. "No, I just need a moment." She hesitated. "I can leave, if—" "Stay," he said, too fast, then softened. "Please." Amina didn't argue. She returned to cleaning, though she moved slower now, watching him out of the corner of her eye. Beckett sat again, heart pounding, stunned. It wasn't lust. It wasn't fantasy. It was a response, real, physical, undeniable. The first in over 1,000 days. He hadn't touched her. She hadn't touched him. But her presence alone had done something no one else could. She didn't know him. She didn't want anything. She wasn't trying, but she made his body remember. And that terrified him, because if she had the power to make it return, she also had the power to make it break again. If you've ever felt unseen, unloved, or broken, drop A in the comments. And if this story touches you, don't forget to subscribe. It helps more than you know. The Hale estate in Westport, Connecticut sat on 4 acres of manicured land behind wrought iron gates. The house was a marvel of symmetry and design. Columns, chandeliers, imported marble floors. But inside that house, something vital was always missing. Warmth. Beckett's earliest memories weren't of toys or birthdays or bedtime stories. They were of silence. Long halls. Staff who were instructed not to speak unless spoken to. A father who communicated in expectations. A mother who traded affection for image control. He remembered sitting at a dining table large enough to seat 20, with only 3 people ever present. His father at one end, his mother at the other, and Beckett in the middle. More decoration than child. Every meal was a performance. Napkin in lap. Sit straight. Don't chew loudly. Don't interrupt. By the time Beckett was 6, he had learned how to monitor his own emotions. Crying earned him distance. Excitement was treated like immaturity. Affection was returned with cold politeness. Once, at 8 years old, he fell from the swing set and skinned his entire knee. Blood ran down his leg. He ran inside to show his mother. She looked up from her tablet and said, "Darling, if you make a fuss over every scrape, you'll never be taken seriously." He never cried in front of her again. Affection wasn't something Beckett received. It was something he was told made people weak. His father's motto echoed in the halls like scripture. If you can't control your feelings, you'll never control the world. So Beckett did what children in emotional deserts often do. He performed. He studied harder than anyone, got better grades than anyone, took piano lessons, golf lessons, chess training, not because he wanted to, but because approval was the closest thing to love he'd ever been offered, and he was addicted to earning it. By the time he turned 12, he had learned to suppress his feelings so deeply that even when his dog died, he only nodded and said, "I understand," while his hands shook behind his back. He became an expert at acting fine, because in the Hale house, being fine was safer than being honest. Beckett's father, Raymond Hale, was a finance titan who built his fortune during the Reagan era. His face had appeared on magazine covers, his quotes on business blogs. His name was whispered in Ivy League lecture halls. But at home, he was an authoritarian. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He delivered discipline with a glance. One time, Beckett scored a 94 on a standardized test. His father's response, "So, what happened to the other 6 points?" At 13, Beckett built a software plugin that helped students share notes more efficiently. He was proud of it, showed it to his parents after dinner. His mother said, "Just make sure it doesn't embarrass us." That night, he removed his name from the project and never brought it up again. Their love wasn't based on connection. It was based on performance. Birthdays were networking events. Family dinners were schedule reviews. When he got accepted into Stanford's business incubator at 19, his mother didn't hug him. She handed him a tailor's card and said, "You'll need better suits if you're going to be taken seriously." Even his moments of success were treated like obligations. There were no "I'm proud of you" speeches, only reminders. "You represent the Hale name. Don't embarrass us." The constant pressure became a second skin. Beckett didn't know how to live without it. And because he had no emotional modeling to refer to, he never learned how to care for anyone. Not himself, not others, without attaching it to what they could do for him or how they made him look. He didn't know how to feel loved, only how to be valuable. The first company Beckett launched wasn't born from a dream. It was born from revenge. He was 19, sitting in a university seminar. His professor dismissed one of Beckett's tech ideas as naive. That same night, Beckett locked himself in a dorm basement and wrote 40,000 lines of code. Over 5 days, no sleep, no social interaction, just fury and a need to prove he wasn't useless. That program became the foundation for a software platform that later sold for $80 million. He never thanked the professor. He just bought the man's former startup and shut it down. Every step Beckett took in his 20s was fueled by that same fire. Prove, succeed, outdo, dominate. He didn't celebrate milestones. When Forbes put him on their 30 under 30 list, he barely blinked. When he rang the bell on Wall Street, he was already thinking about his next move before the echo faded. There was no fulfillment, only forward motion. He acquired failing companies and gutted them for efficiency, not because he enjoyed it, but because fixing things was the only form of control he understood. His board worshipped him. The media painted him as a genius, but inside, every win felt like armor on a hollow chest. He wasn't building from passion. He was building to stay numb. It started with insomnia. Beckett would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, mind buzzing, heart still racing from board meetings long since ended. Then came the headaches, dull, unexplainable, resistant to medication. He stopped eating properly, went days on coffee and supplements. His chefs sent meals he never touched. He stopped feeling hunger, stopped feeling tired, stopped feeling anything. He became an automation in human form. Meet, decide, buy, fire, sleep, repeat. He started snapping at people, not cruelly but sharply. His assistants noticed first, then the IT director, then his CFO, who suggested he take a vacation or get laid. He didn't laugh. The truth was, he hadn't been with anyone in months. He didn't have the energy. He didn't have the interest. He couldn't even explain why. Even in bed, alone, the connection between thought and body felt blocked. He blamed stress. He blamed exhaustion. He never blamed himself, because he had been trained to never be the problem. Beckett Hale had a strategy: hide behind the work. If people saw you closing deals and dominating headlines, they wouldn't ask what you were like behind closed doors. He crafted an image of untouchable ambition, never in public with a partner, rarely at social events, always leaving early. To the media, He was mysterious. To business insiders, he was all work, no play. No one suspected that his body had betrayed him. He never let them see the prescription bottles. Never spoke about the therapists who couldn't help him. Never mentioned the one woman he'd tried to sleep with post-Veronica, and the panic attack that sent him to the ER when nothing happened. He smiled in quarterly meetings, joked at investor summits. No one asked why he never brought a date. He was Beckett Hale, billionaire. They assumed he could have anyone he wanted. They didn't know he couldn't even have himself. Every morning Beckett woke up, the lie began again. Shower, shave, suit, tie, run 6 miles, read 10 market reports, check global indexes, smile at the concierge, nod at the driver, get to the office, speak with confidence. His life was a routine of pretending everything worked, when deep down he knew something had broken permanently. His penthouse was silent, always. He didn't even own a television that wasn't muted. He ate alone. He slept alone. He lived like a perfectly functioning machine. But inside, he was unraveling in a way no X-ray could detect. There were nights he sat on the edge of his bed wondering if it would always be this way, wondering if this was the cost of becoming everything they asked of him. No one saw him. They saw his resume. They saw his empire. But not him. Not the boy still trying to earn a hug that never came. Beckett once believed success could overwrite everything that hurt. He thought if he built enough, achieved enough, earned enough, the void inside him would shrink. But success doesn't fix the kind of broken you can't explain to your reflection. The truth hit him the day he sat in a 5-star suite with nothing but silence around him. That was the day he realized. Money can give you power, but not peace. Status can get you applause, but not intimacy. Success can distract you from your wounds, but it can't heal them. He had everything, and yet he hadn't touched another human being in years, not in a way that mattered. Not until a woman named Amina walked into his life without trying to impress him, heal him, or understand him. And that's when it began to change. But before the healing could happen, the damage had to be seen. And now, finally, it was. Before the betrayal, there was the image. Before the collapse, there was the performance. To the world, Beckett Hale and Veronica Langston were the definition of power. He, tech empire billionaire, sharp-jawed, introverted, rarely seen in public without purpose. She, public relations executive, with roots in generational wealth, always immaculately styled, composed, poised. They didn't fall in love. They aligned. Their relationship began like a contract: quiet dinners, mutual press, appearances, family introductions timed with business milestones. Veronica knew how to play the game, and Beckett, exhausted by messy emotions, appreciated her precision. The first time they kissed was at a charity auction in Tribeca. It was more presentation than passion. He never minded. He told himself it was maturity, control, growth. She brought calm to his chaos. She taught him what wine paired well with what protein. She corrected his posture in photos. She made sure his cufflinks matched his speaking engagements. To outsiders, she was the ideal partner. To his board, she was a status enhancer. To his mother, she was perfect. But to Beckett, even in the beginning, she was efficient. She never asked about his childhood, never touched him unless it was expected, never said "I love you" unless there was an event the next day. She didn't challenge his silence, she adapted to it, and he mistook that silence for peace. Veronica never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She could dismantle a person with one well-timed observation. "I think you should stop wearing that black tie to every appearance," she once said before a fundraiser. "It makes you look like you're compensating." No shouting, no fights, just well-dressed critique. Beckett didn't love her, not deeply, but he convinced himself love could grow. That safety was more important than passion. That structure was better than vulnerability. He admired her intellect, respected her ambition, trusted her. In the professional sense, she never gave him a reason not to, not until the night everything came undone. The night it happened, the city was glowing. It had just rained in Manhattan, and the streets reflected every traffic light like a mirror cracked open. Beckett had just left a shareholder dinner. His driver was waiting, but he waved him off, said he'd walk. He needed air, space, something real. He had made a rare public appearance that night. shaking hands, smiling for cameras, toasting to yet another acquisition that added billions to his portfolio. Veronica was by his side, radiant in a silk champagne-colored gown that caught every camera's flash like it had been designed for that moment. She laughed easily, leaned into him with just the right angle, and said all the right things. Beckett thought she looked beautiful, but not in a way that stirred anything inside him. Not anymore. Still, everything had seemed fine. Predictable. Polished. He left the gala early, citing fatigue. Veronica stayed, saying she had PR people to finish working. By the time he walked the 5 blocks to their building and entered the penthouse, everything he thought he knew about their life was about to split open. The lights were dimmed. There was music playing. At first, he thought she had planned something. A surprise. An apology, maybe. She'd been cold lately, distant. He chalked it up to work stress. But the moment he stepped into the master bedroom hallway, something hit him. A sound, low, familiar, intimate. A laugh, Veronica's, followed by the voice of another man. He moved slowly, like walking underwater. His heart pounded, but his body was too calm. His mind was too quiet. He didn't knock. He just pushed the door open. And there she was, in lingerie, draped across the lap of Landon Reese, one of his oldest professional allies. A man he'd mentored and given an executive seat to only 6 months earlier. They both looked up. Neither jumped, neither panicked. It was as if they'd already made peace with being caught. "Beckett," Veronica said evenly, reaching for a silk robe without urgency. "You're home early." Her tone didn't match the moment. Landon stood, fumbling with his shirt. "Beckett, man, I didn't." "Don't," Beckett said, his voice low, dangerously level. "Just don't." Veronica didn't move closer. She simply sat on the edge of the bed and watched him, calm as ever. "You always did value loyalty over connection," she said, slipping on her robe. "I figured eventually you'd notice that doesn't work." His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists, not out of rage, but shock. She stood slowly and walked toward him. "You're a brilliant man," she continued. "Unmatched. But you're not reachable. You don't let anyone in." "I've tried." He didn't say a word. She looked at him and delivered the words that would stay with him for years. "You were always easier to admire than to love." She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask him to stay. "And Beckett?" He turned and left. No yelling, no rage, no slam of the door. He walked out, got into an elevator, rode it down 72 floors, stepped into a black SUV, and disappeared into silence. The next morning, she was gone. Her clothes, her photos, her name removed from all joint accounts. She hadn't waited to be thrown out. She knew he wouldn't fight. She knew him too well to love him. Beckett didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. His phone buzzed. His inbox flooded. His assistant called repeatedly. He ignored all of it. He holed up in a secondary penthouse across the city, one that was supposed to be for guests or quick layovers between trips. It wasn't decorated. No sentimental items. Just a king-sized bed, a half-stocked kitchen, and a view of a brick wall. It was exactly what he needed. Silence. Sterility. A place to disappear. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat for hours, staring. And when the silence grew too loud, the memories started crawling back. The real ones. The old ones. He was 8 years old again, standing outside his father's study, listening to voices through the cracked door. His parents were talking about him, like a problem to be solved. "He's distant," his mother had said. "Emotionally flat," his father replied. "We'll push him harder. He'll adjust." "But what if he never becomes normal?" she asked, a wine glass in her hand. Beckett had stood there for a full minute before slipping back to his room. He hadn't cried then either. He just folded his favorite drawing, a picture of a rocket ship he had wanted to show them, and slid it under his mattress. He never took it out again. That same ache, that same unspoken message, returned the moment Veronica looked at him with pity instead of remorse. She didn't cheat because she didn't love him. She cheated because she never believed he could be loved at all. That realization ripped through him like a second betrayal, one from the past that had never been resolved. "You were always easier to admire than to love." The words echoed until they etched themselves into his bones. She hadn't just ended a relationship. She'd unearthed a wound that had never fully healed. That week, Beckett met with a trauma-informed therapist. The sessions were sterile at first. He kept his guard up, gave strategic answers. But on the 5th session, he broke. He spoke the words he'd never told anyone. About that night in the hallway. About the childhood overheard. About how he'd spent his entire adult life trying to be enough, and how even at the top it wasn't enough. He admitted that he didn't know what love felt like, and worse, that he didn't trust it, because every time he'd let someone close, the same story played out. They admired him from afar but couldn't hold space for the man beneath the empire. "You ever been loved without needing to earn it?" the therapist asked him. Beckett didn't answer, because the answer was no. That's when the shutdown truly began. Not overnight, but over days, weeks, months. Something inside him folded in on itself. A quiet rebellion of the body against a life lived entirely on stage. And what came next was more than emotional. 3 days after Veronica's betrayal, Beckett woke up with a strange sense of calm. Not peace, not clarity, numbness. He rolled out of bed, ran his usual 6 miles, showered, dressed, and sat at the kitchen counter with his coffee, all without feeling much of anything. It wasn't until later that night, lying in bed, that he noticed it. A disconnect, a silence. He tried to engage himself, mentally, physically, to feel something, but nothing responded. He shifted positions, tried to refocus, still nothing. There was no spark, no tension, no signal from brain to body. The frustration rose slowly, not loud or panicked, but heavy. He thought maybe it was stress. He had read somewhere that stress could affect performance. That seemed logical, so he waited a day. 2, 3, still nothing. By the end of the week, he booked a discreet appointment with a private physician who made house calls for Manhattan's elite. The doctor ran blood work, checked vitals, asked a few textbook questions. Beckett answered each one clinically. The results came back normal. Testosterone fine. Heart rate steady. Hormonal profile unremarkable. Maybe it's fatigue, the doctor offered gently. Take some time off. Disconnect. Beckett didn't respond. He simply walked the man out, thanked him, and closed the door. He knew it wasn't physical. Something had gone deeper. Over the following months, he chased answers like they were investment opportunities. Neurologists, urologists, endocrinologists, Zurich, Tel Aviv, Toronto, Boston. They all gave him the same polished verdict: there's nothing medically wrong. But Beckett knew better. Something had changed the night Veronica looked him in the eye and confirmed the fear he never dared name, that he was unlovable, not just hard to reach, but fundamentally unable to connect. The body responds to that kind of pain in one of 2 ways: fight or retreat. His body chose the latter. He stopped pursuing intimacy, stopped dating. He once stood in a suite in Hong Kong while a luxury escort, recommended discreetly by a business partner, tried to seduce him. She was respectful, professional, and he felt nothing. Not discomfort, not shame, just detachment. He apologized, paid her full rate anyway, and sat under the hotel shower for 45 minutes afterward, wondering what was left of him. He tried therapy again, a different doctor, more trauma-informed. She asked him if he could recall the first time he stopped trusting affection. Beckett said nothing for the first 10 minutes of the session. Then, slowly, he spoke of that hallway, of hearing his parents talk like he was a malfunctioning machine, of how Veronica had used nearly the same language decades later, without ever knowing the history. "My body doesn't believe I'm safe," he admitted softly. "That's not dysfunction," she replied. "That's protection." He didn't cry, but his chest ached for hours after. He started researching the connection between trauma and physical shutdowns. It wasn't rare. He read about soldiers returning from war, abuse survivors, victims of emotional neglect who developed conditions no scan could identify. Their bodies had adapted to protect them by shutting off the pathways where danger once lived. For Beckett, intimacy was that danger, not because he feared sex, but because he feared the emptiness afterward, the proof that even closeness couldn't make him whole. He stopped looking for a fix, and quietly resigned himself to the possibility that this might be permanent, that maybe the cost of his empire was never being able to fully experience the very thing he built it for: connection. Beckett Hale remained a public success story. The kind reporters salivated over and shareholders praised in quarterly earnings calls. His companies grew, his acquisitions multiplied, his public net worth ballooned. And yet, he was unraveling on the inside. No one could tell, because Beckett had mastered the art of appearing whole. He doubled down on structure. Calendar booked to the second, meetings stacked in tight clusters, no public relationships, no appearances at parties unless strategically required. He became known for showing up precisely on time, staying no longer than needed, and leaving before anyone could get personal. He had an answer for everything. I'm focused on growth. Personal life can wait. I'm just not into the scene right now. And people believed it because Beckett made it easy to believe. He wore success like a mask that never slipped. Even his staff didn't notice. The assistants, the security, the PR teams, they saw him as intense, private, highly disciplined. None suspected the real reason he left events early, or why he never dated publicly anymore. Doctors couldn't help. Therapists gave theories. Wellness retreats promised miracles, but nothing touched the root, because the root was never medical. It was grief. Grief for the childhood he never had, grief for the man he pretended to be, grief for the possibility that, beneath all the money and strategy, there was no one who could truly see him and stay. He had offers, women who flirted openly at business events, influencers who DM'd him when tabloids speculated about his single status, even past flings who offered no pressure, just fun. But Beckett declined every one, not out of disinterest, but out of fear, because he knew the truth. If anyone touched him, really touched him, they'd find the broken place. And worse, they might confirm what he'd always feared, that he couldn't be fixed. So he poured himself into work. He became obsessed with efficiency, downsized 3 departments, launched 2 new ventures in under 6 months, built a philanthropic fund that supported mental health in urban communities. Ironic, considering his own battles were locked behind double doors. He gave speeches on resilience, wrote op-eds on innovation, accepted awards with tight smiles, all while going home to a penthouse that was as quiet as a grave. On one of those nights, sitting alone on a balcony overlooking the city, he whispered aloud, "Why not me?" The question slipped out like smoke. Why could everyone else move on? Why could the people who broke him, who called him distant, unlovable, find connection while he couldn't feel a thing? He didn't expect an answer. There was no one to give him one. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Comment never again if you've been there. And if this part hit home, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. The world thought he was invincible. But behind closed doors, Beckett Hale was the billionaire nobody could fix, not even himself. It started the same way every day. Alarm at 4:45 a.m. Run 6 miles through the city's pre-dawn quiet. Protein shake, cold shower, suit, schedule review, emails, voice memos, boardroom, acquisitions, every minute accounted for, every response rehearsed, and through all of it, a lie, because no matter how sharp he looked or how smooth he spoke, Beckett Hale was not fine. He had become an expert at mimicry. The right nod during conference calls, the correct tone at press events, the measured laugh during networking banter. He even kept a running list of acceptable conversation points in his head, sports scores, tech trends, harmless anecdotes, anything to keep the attention away from him, away from the truth, that he went home every night to a bed that had never felt colder. Sometimes he'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror and try to will his body back to life. He'd press fingers to his own pulse just to make sure he still had one. The silence in his body was its own kind of grief. He once stared at himself for 12 straight minutes, not out of vanity, but desperation, trying to find the boy who used to believe he could be more than this. But all he saw was someone surviving. There were moments, tiny, almost cruel ones, that reminded him of how far he'd fallen. A movie scene that lingered on a kiss. A love song playing in a cafe while he waited for his order. A couple holding hands on the sidewalk in front of his building. He never hated them. He just envied what they had. Not the touch, but the ease. The comfort of knowing you were wanted and could give something back. The worst moments came at night. That was when the world stopped demanding things from him. No deadlines, no calls, no staff. Just Beckett in his penthouse, with nothing but time and silence pressing in from every corner. He'd scroll through news headlines until they blurred, order food and forget to eat it. He once opened a bottle of wine and left it untouched on the counter for 3 days. He never drank to numb himself. He didn't need to. Numb was the baseline now. The hardest part wasn't the dysfunction. It was the act of pretending everything was working. He shook hands like a king, walked red carpets with perfect posture, delivered keynote speeches in front of thousands, and the moment the mic was off, the smile faded, the mask slipped, and the ache returned. A slow, quiet reminder that even his best performance could never fool the one person who mattered, himself. He wasn't suicidal. He wasn't spiraling. He was surviving. But surviving isn't the same as living, and every day spent pretending to be fine only widened the gap between who he appeared to be and who he really was. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. No memo to his executive team, no alert to his assistant, no forwarded itinerary to his mother, just a text to his driver, airport. No questions. He was done. Done with the meetings, the questions, the quiet stares. Done with trying to explain something he himself couldn't articulate. For 3 years, Beckett Hale had held the world together, professionally, but emotionally, he had become a cracked glass held by a thread of routine. So when his private physician asked him a casual question during a checkup, "When was the last time you truly rested?" something snapped. He booked the lodge that same night. Not a spa, not a resort, a private retreat built into the side of a snowy mountain in Colorado. Remote, quiet, no press access. Only 6 suites. No cameras. Full discretion. He didn't ask for luxury. He asked for silence. He arrived alone, carrying one duffel bag, wearing a coat darker than the sky. The staff recognized his name, or at least the alias he booked under, G. Ford. It didn't matter. The money transferred. The key was ready. Suite 12. Top floor. Fireplace. Window wall. No neighbors. The first thing Beckett did was turn off his phone. The second thing, sit down on the sofa and close his eyes for longer than he ever had without pressure or planning. He stayed that way for hours, didn't speak, didn't check emails, didn't eat. The lodge was quiet. Nature made its own soundtrack, a wind Beckett had forgotten existed in real life, not just through glass walls and city buildings. He let the quiet in. For the first time in years, by day 2, he had a routine. Wake, shower, walk, sit by the fire, think. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was different. The expectations were gone. No cameras. No board. No one expecting the great Beckett Hale to perform. He didn't even use his name. To the lodge staff, he was just Mr. Ford. And he liked it that way, because anonymity meant he could finally breathe. The lodge sat tucked between 2 frozen ridgelines in a quiet section of the Colorado Rockies miles outside Telluride. There were no flashy signs, no brochures at airports, no influencer campaigns pushing it on the internet. That was the point. It was the kind of place you only heard about if someone whispered it into your ear. Wealthy, discreet clientele, a waiting list for non-referred guests, security embedded in hospitality, designed for people who needed escape but couldn't afford exposure. It had been originally built as a family retreat by a retired tech founder who sold his startup for 9 figures and promptly vanished from public life. When his son converted it into a lodge, he kept the original soul intact. 6 private suites, a main lodge for communal meals, if desired. No valet, no paparazzi, no room service unless requested. Each suite was carved into the mountain, stone walls, wooden beams, radiant heated floors, and full privacy. No guests were placed on the same floor unless they arrived together. Suite 12, Beckett's, was at the far end of the 2nd level, with a floor-to-ceiling glass wall overlooking a snow-covered pine slope and a narrow stream that remained unfrozen due to the natural underground heat vents that pulsed from beneath the rock. The fireplace wasn't gas. It burned real logs. The coffee was brewed by hand, not machine. There was a silence in the air that even the wind respected. The air up there was thinner, sharper. It made his lungs work harder. That was the point. Every step reminded Beckett he had a body, something he hadn't fully acknowledged in years. He watched deer outside his window, saw staff cross the snow in quiet patterns. Sometimes he left the suite and sat outside wrapped in a wool coat, watching. The steam rise from his own breath like it belonged to someone else. Time moved differently at the lodge. There was no rush, just presence. The dining area was optional. Guests could eat in their rooms. But once a day, the main lodge offered lunch with a view. No menus, just whatever the chef had prepared based on what was available locally. Beckett rarely ate there, but on his third day, he sat near the back corner of the dining room just after the peak hour ended. It was there he first heard the voice. Not loud, not pushy, just a humming, low and warm, echoing from the hallway as someone cleared dishes near the serving station. He glanced over, saw only a flash of motion. A woman in a gray uniform, hair tied up, hands quick but gentle as she collected trays and refolded napkins. He looked away, uninterested at first, but something in the cadence of her voice, in the way she moved with unhurried intention, lingered. That night, he returned to Suite 12 and lit the fireplace himself. He didn't know her name, didn't plan to ask, but that small flicker of attention, that hum in the hallway, stayed with him. Just a moment, but enough to shift the silence in his room from familiar to expectant. Before she ever stepped foot into Suite 12, Amina Carter had already lived 5 lives by 27. She didn't come from money. She came from 67th and Woodlawn, Southside Chicago, 3 blocks from a corner store that was open. More hours than the local clinic, 2 blocks from the high school that lost its funding before she graduated. Her mother, Lorraine, had raised 3 kids on a CNA's paycheck and faith. No vacations, no help, just work and community. Her father wasn't around. He left when Amina was 9 and never called again. That was the first heartbreak she never had time to cry over. Amina was the oldest, which meant diapers before homework, grocery shopping after school, helping her baby brother with his asthma treatments when her mom worked night shifts. Her life was never soft, but it was never cold either. She grew up surrounded by sound, gospel on Sundays, kitchen conversations with her aunties, the hum of neighbors talking through open windows in summer, barbershop debates drifting through her bedroom fan. They didn't have much, but they had people. And Amina learned early that love wasn't a word you said, it was what you did. She didn't dream of being a maid. She wanted to be a speech pathologist. Had even started community college classes at Harold Washington after high school, but tuition outpaced her pace of work. And when her mom's car broke down and rent jumped, something had to give. She put school on hold, took the first full-time job she could get, cleaning offices in downtown Chicago. She told herself it would be temporary, but temporary turned into years. 6 months before the lodge job, she'd hit a wall. Her mom had been diagnosed with high blood pressure. Her sister got laid off from her job at a daycare. And her brother, now in his senior year of high school, had been offered an early admission spot at Clark Atlanta, but they had no way to afford the down payment. So when her cousin Jada, who worked seasonally at a high-end ski resort in Colorado, mentioned the lodge was hiring housekeeping staff for the winter, Amina applied. No hesitation, not for luxury, not for fun, but for survival. The money was solid, room and board included, privacy respected. A seasonal contract with the option to renew. She left her family in the care of her aunt and promised to wire money every 2 weeks. And now she was here. 6 a.m., wake-ups, cleaning high-end suites she'd never be able to afford. Keeping her head down, staying out of sight. She wasn't ashamed. She was focused. Every bathroom she scrubbed was a tuition payment. Every fireplace she reset was a step toward her brother's dream. Every sheet she tucked reminded her she was holding her family together from 1,000 miles away. She didn't know who Mr. Ford was when his name appeared on her schedule. She didn't care. As long as he wasn't messy, rude, or entitled, she'd clean his room just like the others. Professional, quiet, efficient. But the first time she walked into Suite 12, she paused. Not because of the decor, though it was sleek. Not because of the view, though it was stunning. But because the man standing by the window didn't turn to look at her right away. When he did, she felt something shift. Not big, not romantic, just different. The first time Amina walked into Suite 12, she thought the room was empty. It was common. Guests often stepped out to the dining lodge or down to the hot tub before housekeeping arrived. She opened the door gently, pushing her cart just far enough in to grab the cleaning kit she kept beneath the folded towels. That's when she heard it. Movement near the window. She looked up. He was standing there, facing the glass wall, hands tucked into the pockets of a charcoal, cashmere sweater, head slightly tilted as if listening to something beyond the trees. He didn't turn around. Not at first, but she froze anyway, unsure if she should speak. "I'm just here to clean," she said quietly, her voice steady but respectful. He turned. Their eyes met, and for a moment the room forgot how to breathe. Beckett hadn't expected anyone. Housekeeping usually came when he was out on his daily walks, or when he left a note at the front desk requesting service while he attended lunch. But this morning he had stayed in. And now, standing across from him, was a woman whose energy didn't match anything else in the room. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile too wide. She didn't scan the space like someone looking for something to comment on. She simply stood there, patient, calm, waiting. "You're fine," Beckett said, voice lower than usual. He realized he hadn't spoken all day. Maybe not since the night before. "Would you prefer I come back later?" she asked, adjusting her grip on the handle of her cart. "No," he replied. "Please, go ahead." She nodded and stepped in, moving like someone used to small spaces, soft shoes, and measured presence. He sat down on the sofa, watching without watching, unsure why the room suddenly felt warmer. Amina moved through her routine, flipping the comforter, fluffing pillows, replacing towels, tidying the fireplace log bin. She was fast but not rushed, careful without being stiff. Her silence wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. Beckett hadn't felt peaceful in years. He tracked the sound of her soft footsteps, the way she hummed something low while checking the closet corners, the scent of lavender she left behind from the linen spray. It was like background music written just for his nervous system. She moved past him on the way to the windows, her arm brushing against the sleeve of his sweater. It wasn't intentional, but it was immediate. A bolt of warmth pulsed through his skin, not electric or aggressive, but alive. His breath caught in his throat. He looked up. She didn't seem to notice, just kept working. But inside Beckett, something shifted, a response. For the first time in over 1,000 days, a physical echo of something he thought had left him for good. He cleared his throat. "What's your name?" he asked. She paused, turning her head. "Amina," she said. He repeated it in his mind before speaking. "Thank you, Amina." She blinked, a little surprised. "For cleaning? For being here?" She offered a small, confused smile and nodded. Then she wheeled her cart out and closed the door behind her. He sat in the silence that followed for 20 straight minutes. Still, not checking emails, not pacing, just sitting, letting the feeling settle. And when he finally stood, he realized something else. His hands weren't shaking anymore. He couldn't explain it. Beckett sat by the fireplace long after Amina left, staring into the slow burn of the wood like it might offer some kind of logic. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It wasn't adrenaline. It wasn't anything he could label. It was presence. For the first time in years, he had felt something real, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just real. And it terrified him. That night, he couldn't sleep, not because of anxiety or work or deadlines, but because the silence no longer felt like armor. It felt like a void he didn't want anymore. He caught himself replaying the moment, the way her fingers smoothed the corner of the duvet, the way she tilted her head when he said her name, the way her touch, accidental as it was, sent a signal down his spine. No woman had touched him in 3 years and triggered that. He had tried everything. Therapists, doctors, controlled tests, wellness retreats with guided bodywork. Nothing. And now, a stranger had walked in, and without trying, done something none of them could. The next morning, he changed his routine. He skipped the early walk. Waited, instead, coffee in hand, sitting by the window, fully aware it was nearly time for housekeeping rounds. It wasn't obsession, it was curiosity. A hunger he hadn't known was still alive inside him. He told himself it was coincidence, but when he heard the soft knock, his breath caught just slightly. "Come in," he said before the second knock. Amina entered. Same gray uniform, same braid, same calm. She greeted him with a polite nod, then went about her tasks. He didn't speak this time, just watched. There was nothing sexual in it, nothing inappropriate. It was the energy. She didn't rush. She didn't try too hard. She wasn't performing. And Beckett realized, painfully, how much of his life had been surrounded by performance. This woman didn't want anything from him, didn't try to fix him, didn't try to engage. She just existed. fully, and that existence did something to him that medicine never could. It grounded him. By day 4, he had memorized her cleaning schedule. Suite 4 first, then Suite 9, then his. He adjusted his walk around the lodge to make sure he was back in time. He hated himself for tracking it, but he couldn't stop, because something was happening. His appetite returned. He slept through the night, and for the first time in months he dreamed, not of numbers or meetings, but of snow, and peace, and quiet company. He didn't know if this was healing or delusion, but whatever it was, it felt more real than anything had in a long time. And for the first time in 3 years, he hoped Amina had cleaned hundreds of rooms in her life. Luxury hotels, corporate condos, a few tech executive retreats in Aspen. They all blended together. Glass, marble, stiff sheets, the smell of bleach and money. But there was something different about Suite 12. Not the suite itself, not the decor or the square footage. The difference was in the man. Mr. Ford. She noticed it the moment she first walked in. He didn't act like the others. He didn't look through her like she was invisible. He didn't scan her name tag or speak in clipped, dismissive tones. He looked at her, and when she said her name, he repeated it. Thank you, Amina. Not with flirtation, not with condescension, with presence. It threw her off. Over the next few days, she became more aware of him. Not in the way a woman watches a man, but in the way an empath reads a room. He was quiet, polite, but heavy, like someone carrying something that couldn't be put down. His eyes were alert, but tired. His posture perfect, but distant. She could always sense tension in a space, and his suite carried it like background noise. But each day, that tension shifted. Softer, looser, lighter. She noticed small changes. He was awake now when she arrived, seated, not withdrawn. The untouched coffee cups became half-finished. The room smelled more lived in, like firewood, not just disinfectant. She didn't know what had changed in him. She didn't assume it was her, but something told her that her presence was registering in a way most people's didn't. She caught him watching her once, not staring, not inappropriately, just watching, like she was a song he couldn't name. Back in the staff hallway, she caught herself wondering what his story was. He didn't speak much, never bragged, never flirted. He didn't carry the air of a billionaire, even though something about him, the watch, the silence, the way he never asked for anything twice, told her he was someone. But not once did he act entitled. He didn't treat her like the help. He said thank you, every time. One afternoon, as she finished restocking towels, she brushed past him by accident. Their arms touched again. Nothing dramatic, but her skin registered warmth. She didn't know why it mattered. She didn't linger, just apologized softly and kept moving. But in her chest, something tightened. Not romance, not fantasy, recognition. Of pain, of gentleness, of someone pretending to be fine. That night, she called her mother. They talked about bills and her brother's school application and what the weather was like back in Chicago. Then her mother asked, "You sound different. What's going on?" Amina paused, then said softly, "Nothing, Ma. I just met someone quiet." She didn't know it yet, but the man in Suite 12, he was beginning to shift because of her. And soon, everything was about to change. By the end of his first week at the lodge, Beckett had memorized Amina's entire route. Suite 4 first, then Suite 9, then his Suite 12. It wasn't obvious at first. He just happened to stay in longer each morning. Missed his usual walk, delayed breakfast, skipped his afternoon call under the excuse of disconnecting. But soon, it became intentional. Every time she entered the room, he made sure he was there. Not in her way, not watching openly, just present, seated by the window, laptop open but untouched, book in hand but never read. He told himself it was curiosity. He'd met thousands of people, investors, executives, analysts, media anchors, and none of them had ever made him feel still. But she did. The soft knock before she entered. The way she always said, "Excuse me," even though she was the one doing her job. The way she moved, head held high, eyes always on her task, never on him unless necessary. She didn't ask questions, didn't make conversation unless invited. She showed up, did her work, left with quiet grace. And that rhythm? It became the only consistent thing in his day. By the third scheduled cleaning, he had moved his breakfast time back by 15 minutes, just enough to overlap with her arrival. On the fifth, he left the fireplace untouched so she'd relight it herself. By the sixth, he was waking up before the sun just to sit in silence and wait. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was presence. Something about her presence quieted the noise inside his chest, the noise that even therapists hadn't been able to reach. He didn't know if she noticed. He hoped she didn't. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't about strategy. It was the first thing in his life he wasn't trying to control. He just wanted to feel it. And every day she arrived, he did. Beckett Hale had spent years in rooms with world leaders, celebrities, CEOs. He'd mastered the art of observation, how to read a twitch of the jaw, a glance too long, a handshake too firm. But what he felt when he watched Amina wasn't analysis. It was something closer to calm. She didn't perform. She didn't rush. She didn't shrink herself or act invisible. She moved with steady intention, as if her presence was allowed to take up space, even in silence. He noticed the way she folded towels into thirds, not halves. The way she lined up the firewood with careful spacing, never just tossing it in. The soft hum beneath her breath, never loud, always consistent, as she swept or wiped or fluffed. A song from childhood, maybe, or church. He didn't recognize the tune, but it wrapped itself around the room like sunlight. She never brought her phone in, never wore headphones, never seemed distracted. And yet, she was fully detached from the usual stiffness of service work. There was no chip on her shoulder, but there was no desperation to please either. She simply existed and did her work with quiet dignity. That was what struck him most. Dignity. In a world where everyone tried to either impress or manipulate him, she did neither. She didn't even seem to know who he was. And if she did, she didn't care. The more he watched her, the more Beckett realized something uncomfortable. He had never truly seen anyone like this before. He had studied people, judged them, even protected himself from them, but seen them as a full, autonomous human being with nothing to prove? No. And now, sitting there in silence, watching Amina adjust a crooked frame above the bed with care, he realized he didn't want to look away. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was awe, not the kind bred from beauty or wealth or image. The kind that grows when you witness someone being fully themselves, unapologetically and without performance. And that awe, it stirred something inside Beckett that he hadn't felt in years. Respect, and maybe something deeper, not yet named. It was subtle at first, a feeling Beckett couldn't name, the kind that crept in slowly until one day he realized it had become part of his daily existence. Amina Carter, the lodge maid who swept his floor, straightened his sheets and offered him nothing but presence, had become the most stabilizing part of his day. And she didn't even know it. He looked forward to the sound of her footsteps. He knew the timing, soft rubber soles across the hardwood just before noon, the pause at his door, the 2 short knocks. He always answered with the same quiet, "Come in." No matter what he was doing, reading, sitting by the fire, pretending to work, her entrance shifted the room, not dramatically, just enough to make the air feel less heavy, his thoughts less sharp-edged, his shoulders less tense. She never lingered, never tried to engage, but her energy did the talking. She brought with her the memory of something Beckett had long given up on. Ease in how she moved, ease in how she breathed, ease in how she did her job without apology or explanation. It steadied him, made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely unreachable. One day she entered while he was seated on the floor, legs crossed, files spread out in front of the fireplace. He looked up quickly, flustered for no reason. "You can come in." "You sure?" she asked, eyeing the papers. "Yeah, I'm just thinking." She nodded and moved around him, clearing the breakfast tray from the side table. He expected to feel self-conscious, but didn't, because her presence didn't demand anything. She didn't pry, didn't fill the air with questions. She let him exist as he was. Later that evening, he thought about that moment, how she walked into a space that held the deepest parts of his silence and didn't try to rearrange them, how she could enter without triggering the need to defend or explain, and it hit him, quiet and sharp. "She makes me feel safe." Not understood, not fixed, just safe. A feeling he hadn't known since childhood, and maybe not even then. He didn't know how to say it. Didn't plan to. He wasn't even sure he should. But every day she showed up, a piece of him, the piece he thought had died, stirred. And every day she left, he waited for the next knock. Not because he needed her to heal him, but because in her presence, he didn't have to pretend he wasn't broken. It started with a question, not a deep one, not rehearsed, just a quiet question in the middle of a morning where the silence between them felt a little less fragile. Amina had just finished straightening the comforter. She reached for the towel basket when Beckett, seated near the window in a dark gray pullover and socks, spoke without looking up. "Do you ever get tired?" She paused, glanced over. Of what? Of all of this. Amina turned fully, her hand still resting on the woven handle. Of cleaning rooms? He nodded. Of working this hard, carrying everything for everyone, being the one who always shows up. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened. "Yeah," she said. "But tired doesn't mean I stop." She resumed folding the hand towels. "It just means I breathe deeper, pray harder, sleep when I can, keep going." Beckett's fingers closed around the armrest of his chair. "How do you do that without breaking?" She looked up again. "Who said I haven't?" It hit him harder than he expected. Not because she said it sharply. She didn't. But because she said it honestly. No dramatics, no pity party, just truth. Beckett let that settle in the space between them. He stood, walked slowly to the fireplace, and knelt to toss in a new log. Amina watched as he struck a match and lit it with steady hands. "I've been broken," he said softly. She didn't respond, just gave him space. Not in the way people talk about, though. Not loss, not grief, not failure. He stared into the flame as it caught and flickered. "I've been shut off." Amina straightened, holding a folded towel. "Shut off?" He nodded slowly, still crouched near the fire. "I don't know when it started exactly. Maybe it was always there, and I just didn't see it. But somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling things, or maybe I trained myself not to." She didn't move closer, didn't interrupt. "You ever been in a room full of people," he continued, "and still felt completely alone?" "Every holiday," she answered quietly. He looked back at her then. A genuine look, not studying, not guarded, just a man trying to be seen. 3 years ago, Beckett said, someone I trusted deeply looked me in the eye and told me I was easier to admire than to love. Amina's brow furrowed, not in confusion, in empathy. "I'd heard something like it before," he continued. "When I was 8, I overheard my parents say I was difficult to love. They weren't angry, just factual, like they were talking about a design flaw." He stood slowly now, crossed the room. "I never forgot how that felt, but I buried it, worked harder, built more, performed, became the kind of man people couldn't ignore. And it worked," he added bitterly, "but it didn't fix the part of me that still believed they were right." He was standing near the table now, not far from her. His voice didn't crack. His eyes didn't water. But the weight of his confession lived in every syllable. "After that betrayal," he said, "my body, it just stopped responding." Amina blinked. "You mean?" He held up a hand gently. "Yeah, that, for 3 years, nothing. I saw every kind of doctor, specialist, therapist. Every scan came back clean. No physical reason, they said, which somehow made it worse, because it meant it wasn't my body that broke. It was my mind." The room was quiet. Amina placed the towel back in the basket and stood still. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look uncomfortable. She just looked present. That alone made Beckett feel like he could keep going. And then, "You walked in," he said. "Didn't speak much, just cleaned, hummed, moved through the space like it belonged to you. And something in me reacted. I didn't plan it, didn't expect it. But it happened." He inhaled. "And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I thought was gone." Amina crossed her arms slowly. Not defensive, protective, of herself and him. "Why are you telling me this?" He thought about that. "Because I don't know who else I'd want to tell." She tilted her head, studying him now. "Is this some kind of test? You seeing if I'll freak out?" "No, because I've had men try to shock me into sympathy before. I'm not fragile." He stepped closer but carefully. "I know. That's why I can tell you. Amina let out a slow breath. I don't know what to say to that, Beckett. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just being here is enough. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You realize I'm just doing my job, right? He nodded. That's the thing. You are just doing your job. And still, it's more real than anything I've felt in a long time. She didn't melt, didn't flirt, didn't run. She just stood there, still, calm, processing. You feel something, she said slowly, and that's good. But don't put that all on me. You gotta own your healing. That's not mine to carry. Beckett nodded sincerely. I'm not asking you to carry it. Then what are you asking? A beat of silence, to keep showing up. Like you already do. That made her pause. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. Just a little. Well, I don't plan on quitting today, she said, brushing her hands on her apron. That's good, he said softly. She grabbed her cleaning tote. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. I'll be here. She turned at the door. Beckett? Yeah? You ever tell a therapist all that stuff you just told me? I've tried, he said. Didn't come out the same. Why me? He looked at her, honest as ever. Because you didn't ask for it. That's what made it safe. She didn't say anything else. Just gave him a look that wasn't pity, wasn't romance, but respect. Then she left. And for the first time in a long time, Beckett didn't feel embarrassed for being human. After that first conversation, something shifted between them. Not dramatically, not immediately, but enough. The silence in the suite no longer felt like armor. It felt like choice. Amina still cleaned like she always did, focused, efficient, no fuss. But now, Beckett spoke, little by little. That book you're humming, what is it? He asked one morning as she polished the table near the fireplace. She glanced over. It's not a book, it's a song. My grandma used to sing it when she cooked. Is it gospel? It's her version of it. Amina smiled. Didn't matter if it was about God or groceries. She made it sound like church. Beckett smiled at that. Not a grin. A quiet smile that stayed behind his eyes for a few seconds too long. The next day, he asked about her family. She hesitated at first, then mentioned her mom's nursing shifts, her brother's college application, her sister's layoff. Beckett listened. Not like a man gathering data, but like a man learning. Do you ever wish you left all that behind? He asked. Every time I scrub a toilet, she joked. Then, softer. But no. They made me who I am. If I make it out, it's 'cause they pushed me. You will, Beckett said. You don't know that. I don't have to. I just believe it. She didn't respond right away. But when she turned away, her smile lingered longer than usual. He kept opening up in pieces. Not stories, but confessions. I don't sleep through the night. I hate when people look at me like I'm supposed to have the answer. Sometimes I wonder if my whole life was just one long audition. Amina never tried to fix him. She didn't hand him motivational quotes, didn't offer solutions. She just listened. And in that space, Beckett discovered something rare. Relief. Not because the pain went away, but because he finally had somewhere to place it. By now, Beckett had shown Amina more than most people ever saw. Not just words, but patterns. His silence, his mood, his need for control over small things, and how that slowly softened when she was near. Still, she never asked what he did, never questioned why someone with hands that clean and posture that straight stayed at a lodge like this for weeks on end. She didn't care about the name on his bank account. She cared about how he spoke to her. And Beckett, he noticed. On day 12, they sat across from each other during a brief pause in her cleaning. He had offered her tea, not in a flirty way, just a respectful gesture. She accepted, sat for a few minutes before moving on. He mentioned in passing that he'd once built a software company that later merged with a global firm. Amina raised a brow. So you're one of those tech guys, huh? I guess. Figures. Figures? You think too hard, she smirked. Always look like you're calculating something. He laughed. Actually laughed. You're not impressed? Not really. Why not? She sipped her tea. 'Cause the people who impress me are the ones who know how to rest, how to talk to folks, how to show up even when it's uncomfortable. You've been showing up, she added. That's what matters. That night, Beckett sat by the window long after she left. not thinking about mergers or profits or headlines, but about that one sentence, "You've been showing up." He had spent his life trying to impress the world, and here was a woman with no wealth, no power, no agenda, who saw right through all that, and still made him feel like he was worth something, not because of his title, but because he stayed. What's more powerful, money or emotional safety? Let us know in the comments. And if this part hit your heart, hit that like button. He hadn't noticed it at first, not until the 5th morning when he woke up and realized he hadn't looked at his phone in 2 days. And for the first time in years, his first waking thought wasn't a to-do list or an unspoken ache in his chest. It was silence, stillness, the kind that didn't feel suffocating anymore. The suite felt different now, not because of any changes to the furniture or decor, those stayed the same, but something in the air had shifted. It started the day after his conversation with Amina, the day he'd opened up about his body, his mind, the weight of silence. Since then, something unspoken had cracked open, and with it came rest. Beckett found himself sleeping through the night. No waking at 2 a.m. to stare at the ceiling. No phantom restlessness that made him pace the room or reread old emails just to feel productive. He slept deeply, without dreams, and when he woke, he felt lighter, not fixed, not whole, but less heavy, and that alone felt like a small miracle. He started doing small things differently. He opened the window in the morning to let in the cold air. He let the fire die down at night instead of tending to it obsessively. He made his own coffee, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. It was in these moments that he noticed something else. He was smiling more. Tiny, quiet smiles, half laughs, subtle grins. Once, when Amina walked in and mumbled a joke under her breath. Once, when she accidentally knocked over a folded towel and caught it midair, proud of her reflexes. And once, when she looked him dead in the eye and said, "You need to moisturize, Mr. Ford. That mountain air's got your skin fighting for its life." He laughed for a full 10 seconds. An actual laugh, not a polite chuckle, not a performance, a real laugh. He didn't understand how it was happening. He wasn't on any new medication, hadn't received a diagnosis, wasn't following some retreat program or journal prompts. He was just letting his guard down, 1 minute at a time, and somehow his body was following. It wasn't a transformation he could explain. It was a slow re-entry into himself, and the more he leaned into it, the more he wanted to stay in this space, not because it was safe, but because it was honest. It started with the weather. A rare snowstorm had rolled in the night before, wrapping the entire mountain in a heavy white silence. By morning, visibility was almost zero, and most of the lodge staff were told to stay inside until it cleared. Amina showed up anyway, bundled in a thick navy hoodie beneath her uniform jacket, gloves half wet from brushing snow off the utility cart. Beckett opened the door before she knocked. "You really came through that?" "Wasn't that bad," she shrugged, breath puffing in the cold air. "They told everyone to wait." "Yeah, well, I didn't listen." He stepped aside without a word. She entered, pulled her gloves off and got to work. He sat on the couch, hands clasped loosely in front of him, watching her check the fireplace and replace the towels like always. But something was stirring in him, a kind of vulnerability that felt restless, not painful, just waiting to be said. "I didn't think you'd come," he said after a while. "Why not?" "Because I wouldn't have." She looked over her shoulder, slightly amused. "That's the difference between you and me, then." "What difference?" "You stop showing up when it gets hard. I show up harder." He blinked. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It wasn't, but it hit deep, because it was true. She kept working, unaware that her words had cracked open something in his chest. When she finished wiping the table and restocked the soap, she turned toward the door. "You okay?" she asked gently, noticing his quiet. "I don't know," he said. "Can you stay for a minute?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." She sat on the edge of the armchair near the fireplace, resting her palms on her knees. He looked at her, eyes steady, voice low. "I used to be able to turn myself off." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if something felt too hard, emotional things, people getting close, I just flipped the switch, focused on work, made money, closed deals, controlled the world so I wouldn't have to feel anything I couldn't fix." Amina didn't move, didn't blink too fast, didn't fidget. She was just there, listening. He continued, "But that switch doesn't work anymore. Not since you—" Her eyes narrowed, cautious. "You blaming me for something?" "No," he said quickly. "I'm thanking you." That surprised her. He stood, walked toward the fireplace, and leaned one hand on the stone edge. "I feel things now, Amina. Not just physical, though that's new too. I feel regret, grief, hope, safety. And that's scary. It's horrifying. Why? Because I don't know how to carry it." She stood now, slowly. "Then don't carry it alone." That landed harder than she intended. He looked at her. "You mean that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't." He sat again, hands open, breathing slower. "You don't judge me. I notice that. It's not my place to judge. It's my place to be human, just like you. But I'm not used to being just human. That's the problem." The silence after that was different, not uncomfortable, just still. And Beckett realized something new was growing between them. Not tension, not obligation, but trust. And in that trust, he felt like he could breathe deeper than he ever had before. It was late, not by the clock, by the air. That kind of mountain night where the sky holds no light, and silence feels like velvet across your skin. Beckett had just taken a long bath, not because he needed it, but because it had become part of his new ritual, stillness. He was standing by the window in a robe, watching the wind bend through the tree line when it happened. Not suddenly, not explosively, just gently, a quiet awareness of his body. A pulse, a flicker, a heat he hadn't felt in years. He looked down, not startled, but alert, present, and then overwhelmed. He backed away from the window, moved to the edge of the bed, and sat down hard. No medication, no thoughts of fantasy, no stimulation, no Amina in the room. Just him and his body, responding, naturally, unassisted. For the first time in over 3 years, he stared at the floor, hands gripping the edge of the mattress, trying to control his breathing. Not out of panic, out of disbelief. Because this wasn't a dream. This wasn't an accident. This was real. And it wasn't about lust. It was about being alive. His body had finally said, "You're safe now." He didn't rush to act on it. Didn't let his thoughts run wild. He just sat with it for minutes, letting the moment exist without performance, without pressure. His mind quieted. His chest loosened. And in that stillness, Beckett did something he hadn't done since childhood. He wept. Silently, not from shame, but from relief. The next morning, Amina knocked on the door and stepped inside like always. But when she looked at him, seated at the table with a mug of tea and a peaceful expression she hadn't seen before, she paused. "You look different today." He smiled. "I feel different." She raised a brow. "In a good way? In the best way?" He didn't elaborate. She didn't ask. But something passed between them, a knowing. And she smiled back, small and soft. "Well, I'm glad." That night, Beckett journaled for the first time. One sentence. It came back when I stopped trying to force it and just let myself feel. They were seated outside, wrapped in coats, side by side on the bench overlooking the snowy slope. It was rare for Beckett to ask Amina to stay after her shift, even rarer for him to speak first. But that night, he did. "Can I tell you something I haven't said out loud?" She looked over, gloved hands resting in her lap. "You can—" He hesitated, eyes on the trees. 3 years ago, I lost a part of myself, not emotionally, physically. Amina waited. No pressure, no reaction, just listening. After my ex, after everything she said, I started shutting down, slowly at first. Then all at once, he looked down at his hands. I couldn't connect at all, not even to myself. There was a pause, the kind that lets the truth breathe. Amina didn't shift away, didn't make a face, didn't try to soften it. She just gave the silence space to hold what he said. He continued, "Every doctor said I was fine, every test came back clean, but inside I knew. It wasn't medical, it was me. I didn't feel broken, I was broken, and the worst part, I thought I deserved it." He turned to her, voice low. "Because she told me I was easier to admire than to love." Amina inhaled slowly. "That's not a diagnosis. That's a curse. He blinked, surprised by her words. Nobody gets to decide if you're lovable or not, she said. Especially not someone who didn't even try. You didn't break, she added. You protected yourself the only way you knew how. Beckett swallowed hard. But it lasted 3 years. Because pain lasts. But it doesn't mean it wins. He looked at her, not as someone hoping to be rescued, but as a man finally choosing to own his story. It's coming back. The feeling, my body, the connection. I didn't think it would, but it is. Amina nodded. Because you're not running anymore. They sat like that for a while, breathing. No titles, no stories. Just two people who had both lived through survival, and were now learning what it meant to live. They were back inside. The fire was crackling softly, its light casting gold across the stone walls of Suite 12. Amina had just finished folding the last of the towels when Beckett spoke again. Can I ask you something honest? She sat down, untying her apron with slow fingers. Always. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Do I seem broken to you? Her head turned, eyes steady. No surprise in her face, no shock, just full presence. She let the question sit in the space for a moment. Then she stood up and walked across the room. Not rushed, not dramatic, just direct. She sat across from him, met his gaze, and said the words he never knew he'd been waiting his whole life to hear. You're not broken, Beckett. You're human. It didn't land like a line in a book. It landed like truth. Heavy, soft, unavoidable. He exhaled. The kind of breath you don't know you've been holding for decades. Then why does it feel like something in me just doesn't work? Because that's what you were taught, she said. You learned early that your value was in your performance, your usefulness, your silence. But healing isn't about going back to who you were before the pain, she added. It's about learning to love the part of you that survived it. He closed his eyes, not to block her out, but to let the truth in. Amina continued. You're not missing anything, Beckett. You've just never been given space to exist without having to earn your place. Now you have that space. You're here, I see you, and you're still here. That's not broken. That's resilient. He opened his eyes, and they were glassy. No tears fell, but his whole body looked lighter. His voice barely above a whisper. No one's ever said that to me before. That's their failure, she replied. Not yours. They sat in silence again, the kind that heals. Then, after a beat, he smiled. A real one. Not a guarded grin, not a deflection, but warmth. Pure, unfiltered warmth. You always talk like that. Only when people need to hear it. Beckett had spent the last 3 years chasing results. Prescriptions, retreats, meditation apps, clinics across 6 countries. All of them promised answers. None delivered connection. Now, seated beside Amina, he realized the truth he'd avoided all along. He didn't need to be fixed. He needed to be seen. They didn't touch that night. Not physically. But their conversation was the most intimate exchange Beckett had ever known. He shared things he had buried for decades. The first time he lied to protect his father's reputation. The way he'd flinched the first time someone said, I love you. How silence had always felt safer than vulnerability. Until now. Amina listened without reacting. She didn't jump to respond. Didn't dramatize. Didn't minimize. She just witnessed. And that, more than anything, helped him begin to feel whole. You're not the only one who's had to hide their pain, she said softly. We just hide it in different ways. You, he asked. I hide mine in responsibility, in taking care of everybody else. Do they know? No, but they feel it. They looked at each other across the space, both stripped of pretense. No roles, no illusions, just two people scarred by life, yet choosing to stay open anyway. That night, as Amina stood to leave, Beckett reached for her hand. Gently, no pressure. She let him hold it. Not tight. Not long. Just enough. Enough to say, I'm here. I see you. You don't have to do this alone. When the door closed behind her, Beckett didn't feel abandoned. He felt safe, because healing hadn't come from a breakthrough. It had come from belonging. It was a Monday morning. The snow was thick, the wind soft, and Beckett was seated near the window, sipping black tea while Amina lit the fireplace. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comfortable now, filled with mutual ease and wordless rhythm. Until the phone at the front desk rang. Miles down the main driveway, an SUV crunched over packed snow. The tires were too clean. The vehicle too new. Inside, Veronica Langston. Hair perfect, sunglasses too large for the shade, lipstick unbothered by the thin air. She stepped out like the mountain owed her something. The lodge manager greeted her cautiously. "Ms. Langston?" "Yes." "I'm here to see my fiancé. I wasn't informed we were expecting. He won't mind. I promise." She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing a smile practiced in mirrors and high society events. "Tell him Veronica's arrived." Beckett was still in his suite when the knock came. Not Amina's gentle two-tap, but a firm, official one. He opened the door to the lodge manager. "Mr. Ford, you have a visitor." "Who?" "She says her name is Veronica." Time slowed. Beckett's jaw tightened. He hadn't said her name aloud in nearly a year. "She's here?" "Downstairs. In the lobby. Tell her I'll meet her in the dining hall in 20 minutes. The manager nodded and left. Amina watched from the fireplace, quietly placing the lighter back on the ledge. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Beckett exhaled, eyes distant. "Someone from my past. Do I need to leave?" "No," he said, too quickly. "Not yet." Downstairs, Veronica waited like a performance was about to begin. She smoothed her coat, crossed one leg over the other, looked around the rustic dining hall with mild amusement. When Beckett entered, dressed in a black quarter-zip and dark jeans, she stood and smiled. "Darling, don't call me that." He didn't sit. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you, obviously." "Why?" She tilted her head. "Because I miss you, and I heard you've been hiding up here like some broken man. I thought I'd remind you who you are." He didn't flinch. "You don't get to define that anymore." Outside the large dining hall windows, the snow fell slowly. Inside, tension began to rise. And upstairs, Amina felt something shift. She didn't know who Veronica was, but she knew this energy, the kind that didn't ask permission, the kind that believed it owned the room. The lodge's dining hall was usually quiet this time of day, late breakfast fading into slow coffee refills. Soft clinks of silverware, murmured conversation among the few guests who braved the off-season snow. Beckett had chosen this place for its silence. But silence wasn't what followed Veronica Langston. She stood as he entered, still wearing that smug, camera-ready smile. "You've lost weight," she observed. "The solitude must suit you." Beckett didn't respond. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. Let's talk like grown-ups." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, his voice flat but steady. A few nearby guests glanced over. Veronica saw it, and leaned in slightly. "Don't embarrass yourself, Beckett. You know I never make a scene. Unless I have to." He sat, finally, arms crossed over his chest. "Why now?" "Because I've been patient," she said. "But this is ridiculous. Hiding up here in the mountains? Do you think anyone's buying this act?" "What act?" "This whole recovery retreat. Disappearing from the media, faking wellness like it's some personal project. You're not that man. You're not fragile." Her tone dropped just low enough to keep others from hearing. "You're a machine. You built your life to be above this kind of weakness." Beckett's jaw tightened. "You came all the way here to shame me?" "I came to remind you who you are," she said, "before some mountain maid fills your head with delusions about emotional depth and candles and closure." He flinched, barely, but enough. She noticed. Smiled wider. Amina walked into the dining hall carrying a tray of coffee mugs. She had no idea what she was stepping into, but the moment Veronica saw her, everything sharpened. She followed Beckett's gaze as it softened, turned, paused on Amina, and understood instantly. Oh, she said it like a diagnosis. "So this is why." Beckett stood. Don't what?" "Say what you're afraid to admit, that this is your project now." She gestured toward Amina with a flick of her hand. "The help?" The air shifted. Conversation stopped. The few guests still seated paused mid-bite, heads subtly turning. Amina froze, still holding the tray. Beckett's face hardened, voice low and cutting. "You will not speak about her like that." Veronica laughed, short, sharp. "Are you serious? You left me for a maid. You left me the night you let someone else into our bed." That shut her smile off briefly. "You were always easier to admire than to love," she shot back. Beckett didn't blink. You don't get to define love for me. Not anymore. The room went still. Amina didn't move, didn't shrink. But her eyes flickered, not with fear but something deeper. Exposure. Veronica grabbed her coat from the chair and looked Beckett up and down. You've really lost it. No, he said, voice steel. I finally found it. Amina didn't usually linger in the dining hall. Her job was simple: clear dishes, wipe tables, refill coffee, stay invisible enough that guests remained comfortable but present enough that the space stayed clean. But today, all eyes shifted toward her the second Veronica opened her mouth. And Veronica noticed. She lived for attention, even unintended. She stepped closer, heels tapping across the wooden floor, her expression sharpened with the confidence of someone who had spent her whole life believing she was above everyone in the room. Beckett stayed between them, but Veronica didn't break stride. She looked Amina up and down, gaze dripping with entitlement. So this is her, she said loud enough for half the room to hear. Amina didn't answer. She held the tray tightly to her chest, swallowing the sting behind her ribs. Veronica continued. I should have known. You always liked quiet women. Easier to manage, easier to replace. Beckett stepped forward. Veronica, stop. She barely glanced at him. What? I'm just trying to understand. You disappear from the entire world. For this? Her eyes swept over Amina's uniform. The plain gray, the worn-out shoes, the apron with a faint stain near the bottom. Everything Veronica despised. Everything she thought defined a person's worth. She works here, Veronica said, fingers tapping her own hip impatiently. She cleans your room. You can't be serious. Amina's throat tightened, not from shame, but anger. She took a small breath and forced her shoulders back, refusing to shrink. Veronica smirked. Tell me, sweetheart, how much does he pay you to pretend you care? That sentence sliced through the hall. A guest gasped softly behind them. Another whispered. That was too far. But Veronica wasn't done. She stepped closer, voice venom sweet. Let me guess. You think you're special? You think you're the reason he crawled up here to fix himself? You think someone like him is going to choose someone like you? Amina's jaw clenched. Not once had she thought that. Not once had she expected anything. Not once had she asked for more than respect and boundaries. But the humiliation of being addressed like she was less than cut deep. Beckett moved before Amina could speak. He stepped fully between them, shoulders squared, voice calm but sharp. You don't speak to her again. Not like that, not ever. Veronica raised a brow. Defensive, are we? Didn't know you cared this much. I do, he said plainly. I care more than you ever understood. Her smile faltered. Just a flicker. You've lost your mind. No, he said. I finally found something real. Something you never gave me. He looked at Amina then. Openly, honestly. It wasn't romantic. It was protective. It was acknowledgement. It was truth. She showed me more kindness in 3 weeks than you did in 3 years. Amina's eyes widened slightly. Veronica scoffed, crossing her arms. She's staff. She's a human being, Beckett shot back. She's beneath you. Beckett exhaled sharply through his nose. No one is beneath me. That's the difference between us. The room stayed silent. Amina's hands trembled slightly around the tray, but she kept her chin up, refusing to look away. Veronica noticed that too. Her jaw tightened. This isn't over, she whispered, fury brewing behind her eyes. You'll regret embarrassing me. I didn't embarrass you, Beckett replied. You did that yourself. Veronica turned sharply, her boots clipping loudly as she stormed out, pushing past another guest who muttered, rude, under her breath. But Amina? She just stood there, still, exposed, seen by everyone in the room, and not in the way she wanted. Her heart hammered quietly against her ribs, but she held her posture, because if she didn't stand firm now, she'd break. Beckett turned to her. Their eyes met. Amina didn't speak. She didn't need to. The hurt was visible in her breath, in the set of her jaw, and Beckett felt it, deeply, more than he expected. The dining hall was still too quiet. Guests kept their heads down, pretending not to watch, but they were listening. Everyone was. Amina stood frozen, not from fear, but from restraint. She didn't want to cry in front of strangers. She didn't want to walk out and give them the story they expected. She didn't want to flinch. But she also didn't want to be in that room anymore. She turned slightly, ready to walk away, when Beckett stepped toward her, calm, direct, intentional. "Amina." She paused. He didn't lower his voice for privacy. He didn't try to pull her aside. He said it for everyone to hear. "You didn't deserve that." She nodded once, eyes low. But he wasn't finished. "What she said to you, how she looked at you, it had nothing to do with you and everything to do with her." She looked up, uncertain. Beckett's voice was steady. "You've been more honest, more grounded, and more important to me in a few weeks than she ever managed in years." A quiet murmur passed through the nearby tables. "I let her belittle me for too long," he continued. "I let her define what love looked like, what success was supposed to feel like. But she never saw me." He took one step closer to Amina. "You did, not because I was wealthy, not because I was important, but because you looked at me like a human being, not a prize." Amina blinked hard. She wasn't used to being defended. She wasn't used to being spoken for, not like this, especially not in front of people who once looked at her like furniture. Beckett kept going. "You showed up every day with dignity, with peace, with strength. She showed up with shame, with judgment, and that's the difference." He turned slightly, now addressing the entire room. "No one here will ever speak to her like that again. And if they do, you'll deal with me." The words weren't a threat. They were a promise. Clear, clean, final. A guest in the back slowly clapped once. Then again. Another joined. Within seconds, the small dining hall, now half full with travelers, executives, and people from completely different worlds, offered quiet, collective support. Not for show, for justice. Amina's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. "Yes," Beckett replied, just for her. "Yes, I did." She nodded slowly. "Thank you. Always." He didn't touch her, didn't reach out, just stood there, on her side without needing credit. That was the difference. That was the choice. She hadn't gotten far. Veronica stood just outside the main entrance, coat wrapped tight around her, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice carried, not loud, but sharp. "He's losing it. I don't care what it takes. Make the board listen." A pause. "Yes, I want to vote. If he's not mentally stable enough to lead, we need options." She didn't even look at the snow swirling around her, didn't notice the lodge guests glancing through the frosted glass door. Her rage was too practiced, too controlled. She wasn't heartbroken. She was insulted. Publicly. And Veronica Langston didn't lose without making someone pay. Beckett stepped outside just as she ended the call. "Who was that?" he asked, already knowing. She turned, feigning calm. "A friend." "You still have a few of those, for now. You're going to the board?" "I already did." He nodded slowly. "Because I stood up for someone? Because you embarrassed me, in front of strangers, in front of staff. She's not just staff. She's beneath your status. She's above your character." That one hit. Veronica's eyes darkened. "I made you," she hissed. "Don't forget who cleaned you up for this world, who polished your name, who made people take you seriously." "You didn't make me," Beckett said, stepping forward. "You made me smaller. You built a version of me that made you comfortable, not one I could live in." Snowflakes landed in his hair, but he didn't flinch. Veronica's hands tightened around her phone. "I'll go public." "With what?" "With what you told me. About your condition." His stomach tightened, but he didn't react. "You think that's a threat?" he said quietly. "You think I'm ashamed of healing?" "You should be," she snapped. "No one wants a man they have to fix." "Good," he said, "because I'm done being fixed. And I'm definitely done being yours." She stared at him, this version of him she didn't recognize. This man wasn't performative, wasn't seeking approval. He wasn't cold, he was clear, and that clarity made her furious. "You'll regret this," she said, stepping past him toward the waiting SUV. "No," he replied. "I regret not doing it sooner." She paused, opened the car door, and looked back one last time. "You think this is love? That girl doesn't belong in your world." Beckett's voice was steady. "She doesn't belong in yours either." She slammed the door. The SUV pulled away. Beckett stood in the snow for another minute, breathing. Not rattled, not afraid, just done. Amina was back in her room, small, Private. Clean. She sat on the edge of her bed, fingers pressed against her temples. It wasn't what Veronica said that unsettled her. It was what everyone else now knew. They'd all seen it, heard it. She hadn't asked for attention. She never wanted to be in anyone's spotlight, especially not like that. Now she felt stripped, not embarrassed, just visible. There was a soft knock, 3 gentle taps, not the coldness of the front desk, not the authority of management, not the expectation of a guest. This was him. She opened the door. Beckett stood there, no coat, just a black sweater dusted with snow. His hair was still damp from standing outside. He looked at her, not unsure, but careful. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. He didn't sit until she did, didn't speak until she gave him space to. But when he did, it was quiet, certain. "I know that wasn't fair to you." She looked down. "You didn't do anything wrong." "No, but she did." "And you took the hit." Amina shook her head. "I'm used to being spoken to like that, by people like her." Beckett's face darkened with regret. "You shouldn't have to be." She didn't respond. He continued, "I can't change what the world sees when they look at me, or you, but I can change how I protect what matters to me. And you matter." She blinked, unsure what to say. "That's why I said what I said. Not for the guests, not for her, for you. Because when she looked at you," he said, voice catching slightly, "she saw a uniform, a paycheck, a threat. But when I look at you—" He paused, looked her dead in the eyes. "I see the person who stood with me when I couldn't stand alone. The one who didn't flinch. The one who didn't ask for anything, but gave more than anyone ever has." Her eyes softened. He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Veronica saw my body. But you saw my soul." The words landed like truth. No romance, no pressure, just raw honesty. "And Amina?" She didn't cry. She didn't retreat. She just nodded. "I saw you because you let me." They sat in that silence. No performance, no pretense. 2 people who had both been judged, discarded, misunderstood, and chose, again, to stay open anyway. The lodge was nearly silent that night, the kind of quiet that only comes after a storm, outside and within. Guests had retreated early, and the wind had died down to a whisper against the glass. Amina had just finished her final shift of the day, wiping down the front desk area, when a familiar voice appeared behind her. "Do you have a few minutes?" She turned. Beckett stood there, jacket unzipped, hair slightly tousled from the cold, his tone softer than usual. Not formal, not commanding, just asking. She hesitated only for a moment. "Sure." They walked the narrow hallway to the far end of the lodge in silence. No explanation, no plan, just movement. He opened the door to his suite and led her through to the balcony. A private ledge overlooking the dark slope and distant pine line. The air was cold, but not unbearable. The sky was full of stars. Amina stepped out and pulled her coat tighter. "Wow," she whispered, looking at the view. "I don't come out here much," he said quietly. "Not because I don't like it. Just, I forget to make space for quiet." "It's hard to make space when your whole life is noise," she replied. He looked over at her, eyebrows lifted slightly. "Exactly." He handed her a mug of warm tea he'd steeped just before she arrived. No sugar, no cream. She accepted it without comment, somehow already knowing it would be made just right. They stood there for a while without speaking. The stars did the talking, and then Beckett exhaled. "I asked you out here because there's more I need to tell you. Things I should have said sooner." Amina turned to him, nodding once. "I'm listening." The tea steamed in Amina's hands as she leaned against the wooden railing, eyes on the stars but ears tuned only to him. Beckett didn't speak right away. He stared into the dark trees below, the line of pines brushing the night sky like a border between 2 worlds. "I don't know how to start," he finally said, "because I've never said this out loud, all of it. Not like this." Amina didn't prompt him. She just waited, present, still, safe. "And so," he spoke, "I grew up in a house with a father who thought feelings were flaws and a mother who used silence as a punishment. We had money, a lot of it, but not warmth, not hugs, not praise, just rules, schedules, expectations. I learned fast that you only got love if you earned it. And even then, it was limited. He paused, letting the wind pass between them. When I was 8, I overheard them talking about me. My mom said I was emotionally flat. My dad said I was not lovable, but manageable. That sentence stayed in my chest like a splinter that never got pulled out. Amina's hand tightened slightly around the mug. He continued, "So I decided if I couldn't be loved for who I was, I'd be loved for what I could do. I built companies, made money, dated women who looked good on paper, made every move to prove I was enough. But that splinter never left." He shifted, rubbing his palms together to keep them warm, or steady. Then came Veronica. She looked like success, spoke like my parents, felt like control. So I convinced myself that was what I deserved. She wasn't cruel at first, just calculated, polished. I convinced myself I didn't need connection, just stability, until I walked in on her with someone else, and she said something that shattered me. He turned to Amina now, eyes steady despite the crack forming in his voice. She said, "You were always easier to admire than to love." Amina inhaled softly. Beckett continued, "I don't know if it was the words or how they echoed what I'd heard as a kid, but that night I went numb, and the next morning my body shut down. I couldn't function, not physically, not sexually. I went to specialists, flew around the world. Everyone said the same thing, no physical reason, which meant it wasn't my body. It was me." His shoulders dropped as if speaking the truth aloud made it lighter. Amina didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. He kept going. "I've been living in silence ever since, pretending I was fine, letting the world believe I chose work over love. But the truth is, I didn't feel worthy of love anymore. Until you." His voice faltered for just a second. "You walked into that room, humming like nothing was broken in the world, and everything inside me shifted. And little by little, my body remembered." He looked at her now, not afraid, just open. "I had to tell you all of it, because I couldn't let you keep showing up for someone you didn't fully see." Amina placed her tea down slowly, stepped beside him. Her presence was her answer. Not words, not platitudes, just being, and it was enough. Beckett had said everything he thought he never would. The silence after his confession wasn't heavy, it was open. And Amina didn't rush to fill it. She just stood beside him, her presence firm and grounding, her breath steady in the cold air. Finally she spoke, soft, clear, no judgment. "You were never broken, Beckett." He looked at her, eyes searching. "You were grieving. Grieving the kid who didn't get held, the man who wasn't chosen for the right reasons, the love you gave away in exchange for safety. And grief, it doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it just looks like shutting down." He listened like it was scripture. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had understood him without needing him to earn it first. Amina stepped in front of him, no barrier between them. "You know what I see when I look at you?" He didn't answer. She placed one hand gently against the side of his chest, not romantically, not possessively, but humanly. "I see someone who kept going even when he didn't believe he could be loved. I see someone who built walls to survive, but still left the door unlocked. I see someone who's learning how to live in his own skin again, even if it trembles sometimes." Beckett's throat tightened, not from shame, but from recognition. "You didn't fail because your body shut down," Amina said. "It shut down because it was trying to protect you from more pain, and now it's waking up, because you're finally safe." He exhaled, like the truth of her words reached somewhere no therapist had touched. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "This, letting someone see me. You already are." She didn't hug him, didn't pull him close. She just stayed there, letting the safety build without force, letting the air between them fill with something weightless and solid at the same time. Beckett looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not just the woman who cleaned his room, not the woman who listened, but the woman who held space for the version of him even he had forgotten existed. The wind had picked up again, not loud, just enough to rustle the trees below the balcony. But neither of them moved. Beckett stood in silence, Amina still in front of him, her hand slowly lowering from his chest. He stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "There's something else." His voice was different now, less steady, more vulnerable. "I've been trying to ignore it, push it down, but it keeps coming back. Every time I look at you." Amina waited. No fear, no assumption, just space. He swallowed hard. I'm scared of losing you." Her expression didn't shift into confusion. She didn't flinch. She didn't say, "You don't even have me," because she knew what he meant. He wasn't talking about romance. He was talking about safety, about connection, about the kind of presence you don't realize you need until it shows up. "I've lost things before," Beckett said. "Deals, companies, people. I've walked away from partnerships, cities, homes, and never looked back. But this? You?" He shook his head slowly. "The idea of you walking out of my life scares me more than anything I've built." Amina exhaled, not dramatically, just enough to carry the weight of what he said into the open air. "Do you think I'm just here for now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I keep telling myself you'll wake up one day and realize I'm too much, too complicated, too distant, too broken. That maybe all this healing is temporary, that it's tied to you, and if you go, it'll all go with you." The words hung between them, suspended like breath. Amina stepped closer, not to fix him, not to quiet him, but to tell the truth back. "You're not healing because of me," she said. "You're healing because you're letting yourself feel. I'm just the one who didn't look away when you did." Beckett blinked. "Once. Hard. I don't want to go back to who I was." "Then don't," she replied. "But don't chain yourself to me out of fear. If I stay, it has to be because we're building something, not because you're afraid of falling again." That hit. Hard. And he nodded. Slow. Thoughtful. "You're right. I usually am." She smirked, softening the weight. He smiled, because it was real. Because even now, in his fear, she saw him. And stayed. The balcony was cold, but neither of them noticed anymore. Their breath mingled in the air between them, small clouds of warmth in a world that had once felt so frozen. Amina's hands were tucked into her coat pockets. Beckett's hung by his sides, relaxed for the first time in hours. He looked at her, not searching for permission, not begging for comfort, just present. "I didn't plan this," he said. "Me either," she replied. He stepped closer. Only one step, but it was everything. "You're the first person who's ever really seen me, and you didn't look away when I couldn't offer anything." Her lips parted slightly, not in surprise, but because the truth settled between them like gravity. "I don't want to rush this," he said quietly. "Then don't," she whispered. "But I need to know what this is." She took one small step forward. Now they were close enough to share breath, but not quite touching. "This is real," she said. "Even if it's slow, even if it scares us both." He nodded. "Can I?" "Yes," she said before he could finish. He leaned in slowly. Not hungrily, not desperately, just intentionally. And when their lips met, it wasn't fireworks. It was recognition. Soft, steady, a silent conversation between two people who had fought for themselves. And finally, found each other. The kiss lingered, not because of passion, but because of peace. When they pulled apart, there was no awkwardness, only warmth. Her eyes didn't dart away. His didn't cloud over. They just stayed, rooted. "That okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," she said. That felt like the first thing all day that made sense. He let out a breathy laugh. "Same." They didn't need to say anything more. They just stood there, side by side, wrapped in cold air and a warmth that neither of them could explain. But both of them trusted. Back inside the suite, the fire had burned low. The lights were dim, not romantic, just real, simple, honest. Amina sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands wrapped around her tea. Beckett sat beside her, not too close, not too far. Their kiss still lived between them, not looming, not buzzing, just present. He glanced over at her. "You okay?" She looked up, eyes soft. "Yeah, you." He nodded. "Still here." That made her smile, a tired, content kind of smile. They talked, not about the kiss, not about feelings, just about life. He told her about the time he skipped his senior prom to attend a coding boot camp. She laughed, told him about getting detention for sneaking snacks into her high school library. He shared how he used to pretend to like jazz to impress his dad. She told him she couldn't stand jazz because her uncle played it too loud every Sunday. They talked about small things, big things, things that didn't need a point, only a place to land. At one point, Beckett leaned his head back and exhaled. I forgot it could feel like this. Like what? Easy. Amina nodded, resting one foot up on the couch. That's how you know it's real. There was no tension in the room. No expectation, just warmth. Trust, the kind of closeness that doesn't beg for more, because it already feels like enough. He didn't kiss her again that night. Didn't ask to stay close, or touch her hand, or move to the bedroom, because this was the intimacy he'd been chasing all along. Not heat, not escape, but being seen, and safe, and held, even from across a couch. She stayed for another hour, then stood slowly. I should let you rest. He nodded, but didn't move to stop her. Same time tomorrow? She smiled. You don't even have to ask. The next morning, Beckett didn't check his email. He didn't read stock reports, didn't glance at the calendar, or think about the outside world. Instead, he woke up slowly, peacefully. For the first time in years, he wasn't bracing for anything. Because something inside him had shifted. Trust. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It crept in during silence, during stillness, during that quiet moment the night before, when Amina looked at him like he wasn't a project, but a person. He waited for her that morning, standing by the fireplace when she walked in. Same uniform, same rhythm, same presence. But everything was different now, not because of what they'd said or done, but because of what they no longer had to hide. She smiled when she saw him. You're up early. Didn't want to miss you. A simple exchange, but that was the new rhythm. Nothing performative, nothing forced, just real. He didn't speak much that morning. He didn't have to. She cleaned quietly. He watched quietly. The silence was filled with understanding, the kind that comes after choosing each other, without demands or timelines. As she packed up her cart to leave, he walked her to the door, not with urgency, but with care. She paused before opening it. You okay? He looked at her. I trust you. Her breath caught just slightly. He continued. Not just with my story, with me. I don't know where this is going. I don't need to, but I know I want to be wherever you are. She didn't answer with words. She stepped forward, placed her palm gently over his heart, held it there for a moment, then nodded. I know. She opened the door and left, and Beckett stood in that space, hand over his chest where hers had been. It was the first time in his life he didn't feel alone, even in an empty room. The offer came on a Wednesday. Amina had just finished her shift, changed into jeans and a hoodie, and stepped into the back hallway to check her messages. There it was. She blinked, read it twice. The position was with a luxury residential group she'd applied to months ago, long before she left Chicago. She'd forgotten about it completely. Full-time, relocation covered, competitive salary, health benefits, clear growth path. It wasn't a dream job, but it was the first one that felt real. She sat down on the bench near the staff kitchen, phone still in her hand. A new life in New York. A chance to support her family without wondering how to cover bus fare. A chance to work a schedule that didn't include flipping mattresses or folding towels. A chance to have more. But then, there was Beckett, and her chest tightened. They hadn't defined anything. No labels, no plans, but what they had wasn't casual. She could feel it every time he looked at her like she was home. Every time they sat in silence that said more than words. Every time he reached for her hand like it was instinct. She opened the email again. They needed an answer by the end of the week. Her fingers hovered over the reply button. She didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, she sat back and stared at the wall, trying to figure out if choosing herself meant losing him. Amina didn't bring it up right away. She tucked the job offer into the back of her mind, behind laundry schedules, tip envelopes, and the small moments with Beckett that had started to feel like the only part of her day that actually belonged to her. But it was there, in every pause, every glance, every time she walked toward Suite 12 and felt the weight of a choice she hadn't made yet. Beckett sensed something. He didn't ask immediately. He never pushed. But by Friday morning, when Amina knocked on his door and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, he knew. She was slipping away in thought. He opened the door slowly, stepped back, and watched her walk in with her usual rhythm, but less ease. You okay? He asked. She paused by the fireplace. Yeah. Just thinking. You've been doing that all week. Maybe I've got a lot to think about. He nodded, studying her. then said it, not with pressure, but with truth. I want you to stay. The words landed gently, but firmly, like they'd been waiting behind his ribs for days. Amina's hand stilled on the towel she was folding. She looked up, eyes cautious. Why? Beckett didn't flinch. Because I feel whole when you're here. Because your presence makes space in places that used to feel tight. Because the silence doesn't scare me anymore, and I don't want to lose that. Amina looked down at the fabric in her hands. That's a lot of weight to carry. It's not pressure, he said quickly. It's just honesty. Then here's mine, she replied. I got a job offer. In New York. Beckett's breath caught, not loud, but enough that she saw it. He nodded once. And you're considering it? I have to, she said. It's the kind of job that opens doors, and it doesn't come with emotional history, or risk, or me. Exactly, she whispered. They stood in the quiet for a while, not in anger, not in blame, just uncertainty. And that uncertainty hurt more than either of them expected. Beckett didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fireplace long after the flames died, staring into the embers like they might answer the questions he hadn't asked out loud. He didn't blame her. He couldn't. Amina had spent her life showing up for everyone else. If this was finally her chance to show up for herself, how could he ask her not to take it? But he couldn't ignore what her absence would mean. He thought about the version of himself before she arrived. Empty routines, silent meals, the ache in his chest that no therapy or travel ever healed. And then he thought about her voice, her rhythm, the way she entered. A room without trying to take it over and still managed to change it.